Good morning, everybody. This is Grant with State of the Spark. Oh, I got to take this off. Man, I'm loving this morning. I'm listening to Rapper's Delight, the extended version, man. I got a good radio station going this morning. Let's just start with that. What are you grateful for this morning? I'm grateful for my radio station, man. We got a good station this morning. I'm loving it. So the Today Show, talking about defining the good life, and I've got it for you. In fact, where did this term come from? Now, I know we've talked about a lot of people. Good morning, Brock. Man, you were Johnny on the spot this morning, sir. Bam! Brock I caught him right. So listening to Rapper's Delight, which is part of my good life, but you hear this term quite a bit, and it's what is the good life? And we're going to touch on that, and just so you know, it comes from here. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about where the phrase, at least as we use it in the modern way, where the term good life comes from. And it has seeded me and Marissa's marriage from the very beginning. We're also going to talk about two pieces of other news that I think you really need to hear. Number one, what is dark patterns on a website? Now, this isn't new news to developers per se. We've used the term black hat for hacking, but there's also some techniques in web design that we've been using as a term called black hat. But California just passed a law on dark patterns, and I'll touch on that real quick because that affects you. That affects your website. We're going to talk about Skybrators. What's a Skybrator? Yeah, we're going to touch on that. But before any of that, cup of gratitude. What's your morning music like? Because what I'm grateful for this morning is my awesome radio station. Again, like when you come in and listen to Rapper's Delight, the long version. Now, you think you've heard Rapper's Delight, but when you actually listen to the long version, he says gray patterns, zip. Gray patterns are kind of between white. This is for those who don't know, who are watching. Brock says gray patterns, zip it up. Because there are patterns that are somewhere between white hat and black hat. But the legislation might be dragging what we've known to be gray patterns in web design into the category of dark patterns. So we're gonna touch on that real quick. So yeah, I'm grateful for morning radio. Now listen, Marissa says she hearts it. Good morning, Marissa. Marissa went out, and I'm super grateful for Marissa. I was having a crap day after an encounter earlier, and she just loved on me all day, and it was awesome. So I'm grateful for that. But she also got up this morning and did 3.5-ish miles with her little friend Natalia as they prepare to train, and they're training hardcore for the Arizona Trail. I don't think I would be up for it. Let's be honest. I think Marissa would absolutely, and her team, her crew of superheroes would absolutely murder this Arizona Trail. And I think I would just fold up and cry, which nudge, nudge to some unnamed person in our beloved friend group went on a hike with us, and they were Johnny on the spot and ready to go. And just a few hours in, they folded. And I think about that when I think about Marissa hitting the Arizona Trail. So what am I grateful for? I'm grateful to be surrounded by ambitious people who are challenging me to be more than I've allowed myself to be. And I'm grateful for my awesome radio station. Brittany jumps in. Brittany, the powerhouse, jumps in. Grateful for her Think and Grow Rich book club. We had 10 people join for the introduction through Desires, and it was mastermind level conversation, and I've really missed that. Dang, sold. I've missed that. Is that your clubhouse group, Brittany? Oh, Brittany confesses. I didn't out you, Brittany. Brittany confesses. That was her. I didn't out her, but she confessed it. We all got together, and I'm so grateful that we have friends that will visit us when we travel. And so Brittany took the red eye, showed up at a god-awful hour, crashed on in our pad in Breckenridge, Colorado, then like a super trooper, dragged her butt out. We got breakfast at our favorite donut joint, got to the mountain, hiked, and a few hours in, she was quaking. And when I say that, I don't say that to dog her. She had already pushed through her limit and pushed so far, jet lag, lack of sleep. And this girl went like an extra hour and a half or two up a crazy incline. And Marissa's like, doo-doo-doo, another 8 hours. And we're like, F that. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little grateful. I'm grateful for good friends who will come on a trip. And then Marissa jumps in. It was definitely elevation sickness. I didn't even cover that. Jet lag, lack of sleep, and then elevation sickness, quaking from the hiker herself, Marissa. She jumped in and dropped that bomb. So I'm super grateful that we have friends that adventure with us. And I'm super grateful that we own our ish, because I didn't out Brittany. You can't accuse me of it. I didn't say it, but she said it. But hey, let's go back to this real quick. I want to know where this is, because mastermind level conversations I'm down with the sickness. So if that's a Clubhouse thing, I'm in. Or if it's a Facebook thing, whatever. You just let me know if I'm allowed to even lurk. That will be huge. And then Joe Childs jumps in and says, elevation sickness is like trying to sleep with a pillow over your face. It's true. Joe is so right. This is Dr. Childs, and he knows elevations as well. And Joe, you're absolutely right. Me and Marissa drove from Kansas City, Kansas, right up until past Denver. Denver's the Mile High City, and it's pretty high. You get into Breckenridge, you're almost twice as high as Denver. That elevation, and we drove up there. Me and Marissa pulled in. We got a drink, and it went right to our head. We got one little drink, and then we had to go back to the apartment and absolutely crash, because it was absolutely like trying to sleep with a pillow over your face. So let me edit what I'm grateful for this morning, you awesome, beautiful people. I'm grateful for you guys. Brittany's in here popping in for the show. And she's leading a mastermind group, and she's like facilitating one of our largest networking groups on Clubhouse. She's also running her own businesses and empire building with her husband, and sent me her freaking definite chief aim, and it's huge. I used to have mine on a little 5x8 card. She's got a full blown like mission statement. Then we've got Marissa here, who's a powerhouse of her own, out there training with her awesome team of people who are about to tackle tons of mileage on the Arizona Trail. We've got Joe Childs, who, if you knew what this guy was doing in education technology and the think tanks he's a part of to actually cultivate education for students of tomorrow. For Brock, who's like a wizard creating apps and software. And this guy who has, if you saw Brock's vision for the impact, building his own kind of empire in the way that kind of Elon is building the components for a Mars civilization, Brock is kind of doing this in the area of software and project management of his own. So what I'm grateful for this morning, I'm grateful for my radio station, but I'm grateful that you guys are alive and kicking butt out there. Thank you for reminding me that there's people doing awesome crap, and maybe giving me an appropriate amount of FOMO of my own. Let's talk about other news, my beautiful friends. You know, Dory wrote that out the other day, and I was like, what is she writing? I didn't understand it, but she was Spanglish spelling my transition music. Two pieces of quick other news, and I think it's actually brilliant. Piece of news other one, good vibrations. Yeah, good vibrations right here. Boom. Bladeless turbines, not wind. They are wind turbines. They're bladeless wind turbines, could bring wind power to your home without the environmental impact of large wind farms. You see, large wind farms actually are starting to get a bad rap. Are they too much work for too little meat? Are they actually beneficial? Are they killing birds? All of the above is like partly true. And yes, the technology just has to get worked out. Everyone chill. But no, there is a lot of critique of bladed wind turbines. But a company by the name of Vortex Bladeless recently won the approval of Norway's state energy. Norway has a state energy company called Equinor, which recently named Vortex Bladeless as one of the top 10 most exciting startups in the energy sector. Now, it's roughly 3 meters high, a basically floppy cylinder that's a little sturdier. It's like a heavy canvas bag around a fiberglass rod or an elastic rod inside. And it's kind of like an airbag, if you will, like the car dealership sales creatures. But it stands erect, and then as the wind blows it adjusts the wind turbine inside, and that wind turbine captures the vibrations as electrical energy. It creates noise at a frequency that's undetectable to the human ear, and it's no danger to wildlife, migration patterns, or particularly any other negativity if used in an urban setting. Now, what did they name these things? You betcha. because of the way they look and move and vibrate. Yes, they're temporarily calling them Skybrators. Yes, you heard it here. First thing in the morning, they are in fact called Skybrators. They probably need a rebrand. And the Reddit thread, when they announced the technology, the Reddit thread was overwhelmed with nearly 40,000 comments on the name alone. However, the positive upvotes that this technology had is significant. And that even though they were ridiculing the name, they validated the technology. Real quick, Brock says, boom, grateful for my coffee and a good friend that reminds me to pause for gratitude. You got it, man. Virtual friends, pausing for coffee, guys. If we don't know what we're grateful for, then do we really know what we're working for? If you're there not connected with the things that you're grateful for, do you even really know what you're working for? It's like thinking of apple pie a la mode, hot out of the oven with ice cream. You know I'm going to work through my workout if I am incentivized and grateful for hot apple pie with a French vanilla bean ice cream plopped on top. I'm going to work it. You got to know what you're grateful for to know what you're working for. So real quick, so that's Sky Vibrators. Let me drop the link on you if I haven't already. Boom, Skybrators. Very interesting tool. Boom. Good morning, Carrie. I hope you're doing fantastic this morning. Carrie drops by with a like. Okay, so that's Skybrators. You've heard the word here first, and it's coming to a town near you, and it's actually could be a superior wind technology. Now, let's talk real quick about a California ban that is affecting nearly all website design, more so than the ADA. Let's talk about dark patterns. Somewhat of a nerd alert. We won't take too long with this before we talk about the good life and why the good life is bad as mess. And I'm excited to talk about it, though. It's going to be a brief. It's not really a lesson. It's just a concept and where the concept comes from. Good morning, Daryl Ash. I hope you're doing awesome. And Daryl, I always want to encourage Daryl Ash. Daryl Ash is a powerhouse. He's a father. He's killing it, but he's also a dreamer. And if you know any dreamers in your life, I want you to reach out to them today because the dreamers in your life need encouragement. This world of worriers, this world of negative Nancys, you're too busy trying to fix us when we're not what's broken. Dreamers are not what's broken. Dreams are going to help us rise above the tide. So if you are a dreamer, I need you to turn to someone who's not a dreamer and encourage them to dream. If you aren't a dreamer and your commonality is, well, you can't do that because, or, oh, it's such a challenge to do this, turn to them and just say, you know what? Please keep dreaming. We need to figure out how to do what you're dreaming about. Yes, we got to do that. But what we need more than anything is the dream. So I like Daryl Ashton. I want to encourage you, Daryl, keep dreaming, bud. Keep going hard. And then, of course, Carrie. Man, whenever I see Carrie, and I don't even think we've spent like hardly any time together ever. In fact, if we ran into each other at Black and Brew, I probably wouldn't even recognize her. But she has such a positive freaking energy when she comes on the show. So I love it, Carrie. Good morning to you. So in this second piece of other news, California, of course, leading the way in protecting its citizens, is everything starts with a dream. Boom. Carrie drops this. Everything starts with a dream. I heard things are created twice. Number one, they're created in your heart and mind as dreams. And number two, they're created on paper. Absolutely. And Daryl Ash just throws up. Yeah, buddy. He's throwing up a fist, man. Power to dreaming, dude. I'm loving it. Power to dreaming. There's Daryl Ash just getting up and hustling this morning. I love you guys, man. Good stuff. So what is web design that has dark patterns? In short, California is trying to protect its consumers. And in protecting its consumers, it decided to codify what is considered dark patterns. Now, we have these things called black hat. We have these things called black hat hackers. And these are basically little tricks that hackers or developers do so that they rank on Google. For an example, one of these was called keyword stuffing. So if you knew that you were trying to rank for a certain set of keywords in the early days of Google will actually penalize you for this today because it's smart enough to. But back in the day, they didn't know how to rank on Google. So they realized, well, let's rank for web design. So hold on. I got to share this with you. Joe Childs. Joe Child says nearly everyone I know who lives in California is dreaming of leaving that state. Now, Joe Childs is speaking from credibility. He has very close family that has worked and lived in Silicon Valley for years. Joe himself has been part of the startup community for years. So he's got family in Silicon Valley. He's got family up and down the West Coast. And he's being pretty funny with this, but it's probably true. I love it. So they passed this law, and this law isn't unique to California. Washington State also presented another bill that's still being debated. But some of these black hat techniques are like taking a bunch of keywords, putting them on the front end of the website, shrinking them to 1-point font, and making them the same color as the background. That way, a user's just browsing the website. They never see the keywords, but they rank for all these terms on the front end. Now, Google has since have found ways to penalize you if you do keyword stuffing, but a new series of things are kind of in this gray zone, as Brock pointed out. That we've been considering them for a long time, that you could do things to still create urgency. For example, if you have a checkout, I know Daryl Ash had LakelandHometownExpo.com, and his website is all about getting the building community and the home expo going for Lakeland. He owns that domain. He owns that concept, and it was on the back burner because of COVID. But he dreamed of this. And it would make sense to put a timer and say, hey, you got to buy your tickets by this date. The state of California actually says you can't do things like timers that basically create a false sense of urgency. You have to prove first that there's a legitimate sense of urgency. For example, we have this term called evergreen. Basically, you have a webinar for sale, and that webinar for sale is going live in 2 hours. And the timer says you have to register within the next 7 minutes or you're going to miss your seat. Except once that 7 minutes is finished, it resets to 7 minutes, and anyone landing on the page sees a 7-minute timer. Now, for the longest time, this was considered a legit practice. ClickFunnels is big for using this. We've used this for clients. We're going to have to re-edit it because if your website is visited by a California resident, the state of California can still penalize you in another state. At least that's what they're trying to do. If you're a web developer in California, you'll definitely get penalized. But as other states protecting their consumers roll this out, this will actually become, it's kind of like GDPR. GDPR was requirements in the European Union that they reserve the right to penalize you or fine you, even if you were an American web design company or an American service provider, and your website violated GDPR. In Europe, they can still penalize you here. Now, there's not a lot of jurisdiction and there's a lot of debates, but you're going to get tied up with legal fees. It's the same with the state of California and the state of Washington. Is it actually punishable? Can they follow through with it? We're not really sure, and that has yet to be proven. But the trend will continue, especially with any left-leaning states that have strong consumer protection laws. So what are some of the examples? Number one, what's known as the Roach Motel. This is a dark pattern. It's when it's super easy for a client to sign up, but super difficult for them to cancel. A case in point is I've been a member of Just Move, previously Gold's Gym on the South Side, for years. And it's super easy to sign up. You go on the website, sign up, put it on your credit card. To turn off my subscription during COVID, I actually had to go in, click a button that said cancel. That cancel button went off page to another web page to a long description. And I've read the long description. And finally at the bottom, it said you can only cancel by phone. Call here. I called. And they said, we're only in the office on this day and these limited hours, and we'll call you back. It went 2 weeks. They charged me again, and then they charged me a cancellation fee when you pay an additional cancellation fee when you start the membership. I didn't put up too much of a stink because I just wanted it over with. But that's what's known as a Roach Motel. A second thing is called price comparison prevention. When you have an e-commerce website and you have two products of comparable price, but you make it difficult to actually compare the price. You actually have to basically, by law in California, make a price comparison function, which in a basic WordPress website or most Square sites is actually kind of difficult and considered advanced functionality that you have to pay extra for. Misdirection. When a website design purposely focuses a user in one direction or on one thing in order to distract them from something else. Now, this is the one that's going to hang up service companies and web design companies and legal trolls. Similar to the ADA, this law is very ambiguous. How can you prove that? You don't have to prove it. You just actually have to bring a lawsuit up, and then they'll settle out of court over some of these things. So this is creating an entire legal category, and I probably should go in to be an expert witness. I should put up a website. Marissa, if you're watching, let's put up a website for web design expert witness on dark patterns. Boom. Carrie says, just got a random package 2 months after canceling 2 times through email and phone. Is this just Move, my same place? That's crazy. Carrie is confessing that she had a similar situation happen. And then Brock jumps in. Dark patterns will only hurt you in the long run. No legitimate reason to use them. Shortcuts for business growth to avoid actual innovation and or hard work. And Brock is absolutely correct here. I 100% agree with this philosophy. If you have a solid business with solid profit margins and have targeted your messaging towards a target client, which are just good business practices, you probably don't need dark patterns. You probably don't need them at all. Here we go. Boom. And then here's a great link. And so I'm actually going to, it's in the comments already. Thank you, Brock, for actually pulling this up. I'm actually going to tear over this today. But in short, many websites are guilty of this because you think, why not do an evergreen timer? That creates a little bit of urgency. For sale now. We put that in people's signs. How many times are they going out of business sale, going out of business? How long have you been going out of business? 2 years? So there's some ambiguity here. But I do agree with Brock's concept here in a big way. Stick to good business practices. Stick to good business practices. Stick to good business practices and make sure that you have a profit margin, you have a solid, reliable business. Now, the biggest infractors of this are infopreneurs, people selling books, people selling courses, but you don't have to give in. So by all means, check out the link that Brock just provided right there and see if your website has it. And I'm telling you, if you're a client of ours, we have used some of these before, not like the hacker stuff, but stuff like not like Roach Motel stuff, but we have created a design that makes you focus on one element, not necessarily to distract you from another element, but to definitely focus on good marketing tactics. So we're going to have to adjust, and this will probably affect your website. All right. So that, my friends, is dark patterns on websites. Thank you very much, Brock, for your tools there. And he even says he actually says replying to Carrie's note, various services have done this to me. And this is a big one. If your business relies on making it difficult to quit, in sales, we call it risk reversal. The risk should be on the service provider. And I tell my clients, you can cancel anytime, so it's risk reversal, which means you can just call up. We're going to make it easy. Web designers make it really hard to quit a web design company, to quit a web hosting company. We try to make it really easy because we have to earn your trust over the long term. And so it's called risk reversal. And the risk is on the service provider, not the client. And then Brock just says, directing focus is just good design, I think. It just depends on how you do it and whether or not the motive, and this is what the court cases will prove, whether or not the motive is to distract from some other terms or conditions or something else like that. All right, my super friends, let's talk about other news. Oh, not other news. This was other news. Let's talk about what is the good life. So let's touch on this real quick, my friends. Here we go. So you hear a lot of talk today, and this is not going to be long and drawn out. In fact, if anything, other news took way more time than this will take. But I think it's important. So a lot of times people will talk about the good life. Let's live the good life. And in some ways, this has become synonymous with the Instagram life. And, is it Instagram worthy? And I've even verbed that with Marissa in conversations. Man, I just don't know if it's Instagrammable, man. Like, I don't know. Writing a book is not Instagrammable. So, like, it's not sexy, the fact that I just ordered my book. So I don't know how to create hype around me writing, like a gnome in the corner at my typewriter. Like, it's not a sexy thing. Although Robin Sharman's done a pretty good job at it. But what is the good life? And we've talked a lot about mission. And I do believe there's a correlation between mission, because we talked a little bit about making sure that your inner life is on mission, making sure that your inner life is taken care of, and then making sure your external life is, and then helping other people with that sort of thing. And I've been really scratching my head and soul searching over this season of life. Brock says, is it Insta-worthy? Hey, easy come, easy go, right? If you're a flash in the pan, you'll go just as quick. I think they say quick riches. What is it? Quick riches dispelleth quickly or something to that effect. Joe Childs probably knows the scripture there. But it's basically, if it's Insta-worthy, it's Insta-go. Like it comes and goes so quickly. But what is your good life? You know, we talk a lot about grind. Do you dream and fantasize when you've made it? Do you dream and fantasize of the grind? I believe people like Elon Musk dream and fantasize of engineering morning, noon, and night the rest of their life. And that's cool for some people. I believe that Steve Jobs visualized himself morning, noon, and night working through design problems, working through marketing problems. Is your grind aligned with how you see your good life? When we talk about mission, we need to make sure that your mission is aligned with your good life or it's not sustainable. When Marissa and I moved to the Dominican Republic, we had a good life in mind, and I'll share that in just a quick second. And we didn't have integrated was the work of establishing ourselves, the work of establishing ourselves in a foreign country, the work of learning the language so proficiently that we could build our social network and thrive economically in the Dominican Republic. We didn't visualize necessarily the work of morning, noon, and night trying to figure out how to get downtown in a tap with no car and how to keep a low profile so you didn't get mugged, and how to make sure that you got around the Russian gangsters because they had sex trafficking going on, and how to make sure that you didn't stress over your wife going down the street alone, all those sort of safety things. We didn't visualize that as part of our good life. And so very quickly, I say very quickly, we were there for almost a year. Very quickly, though, we realized this was not sustainable financially, but more than that, it wasn't sustainable energetically. We were not motivated over the long term to fight this kind of fight, to do this kind of work. So if we talk about mission and a sense of purpose, you have to ask the good life question. What is your good life? And this has to be unabashedly 100% selfish. You have to selfishly admit what you really, really want. Now, you can selfishly admit that I just want to sit on the beach drinking Mai Tais, but I don't know how to do that and make the money I want to make or make the impact I want to make. Okay. Sounds like you got more heart work to do. It sounds like you need to spend more time on your quiet time and journaling and figuring out, do I really want to sit on the beach and drink Mai Tais? I can tell you unabashedly, I don't know if you remember the scene from Fight Club, but he lets go of the steering wheel and he asks the two gentlemen in the back seat, what do you want to do before you die? And one says, I want to build a house, sir. And the other one says, I want to paint a painting, sir. Carrie says, this is huge. It's huge that you know your good life. If you're a realtor and you cannot see yourself handing the keys to a client, driving in the car and dreaming with that client of that next location they're going to raise their kids at or play with their dogs or build a garden. If you do not like that work, and the work of, hey, let me help you navigate this paperwork, you're doing a stepping stone, and that's okay. You're allowed to do stepping stones, but don't call it your mission. It won't be sustainable. And you're going to have your wires crossed on what is sustainable. So I think if we had concentric circles, if you had a hot molten iron core like the earth of what is your mission, if you are not unabashedly honest about your good life, if you're not having those very difficult conversations with your partner and spouse on your good life, and let me tell you something, most of the conflict that happens in me and Marissa's marriage, most of the conflict is we are still at 10 years married. We are still, and it's seasonal too. These things change with seasons. It's not a permanent fixed thing, which is why you always have to be talking about dreams and goals because they evolve. Our biggest points of conflict are we're trying to hammer out and visualize a vision and a mission for ourselves that synthesizes both of our good lives, which are slightly different. The older you get, the more nuanced it is. Carrie says, I've just really worked on that the last couple of years for massive clarity. And Carrie, I would love to catch up and hear how you've actually worked through that. It would be awesome to kind of hear your process on that. I would love that. So where did we get this concept of the good life? Well, I mean, obviously, following your bliss has been part of the human spiritual journey for as far back as we have writing. We could go back in nearly all of the spiritual institutions and find conversations about chasing your bliss or following your dreams or living up to God's calling on your life, right? You have this everywhere. But in the modern era, the good life has been passed around as kind of a token card that's kind of grown synonymous with Instagram. That's kind of grown synonymous. Absolutely, Carrie. Let's do it. Let's get it on the calendar, sister. Let's do this thing, man. I love the excitement, man. So I want to read something to you. So when Marissa and I first got married, we knew we were looking consciously for the good life 10 years ago. And we searched high and low, and we realized in the modern era, the good life was a term pioneered or popularized. I wouldn't say invented. I wouldn't say discovered. Of course not. Popularized by a couple. And that couple is Helen and Scott Nearing. Maybe you've heard of them, maybe you haven't. And of course, this is actually a colorized photo of Helen and Scott Nearing. Helen and Scott Nearing were basically economists, accountants in New York City in the early 30s. And they realized that society was going a direction they just didn't want it to go. And they realized that there was a huge hamster wheel that people were on. They realized we went to jobs to get currency, to find food, to put food in our mouth, and then hopefully with the time we have left, in a day's labor, they were accountants, they were mathematicians. In a day's labor, we've worked a lot to put food in our mouth. What if we cut out the middleman and worked a day's labor for food and put food in our mouth and then had the cushion of the rest of the day? That very simple engineering equation spun me and Marissa on a life that took us through Taos, New Mexico. We got certified in Earthship school. We loved Earthships. There was inherent challenges, so we didn't move on with Earthships. But then this led us to our desire to be in the Dominican Republic. Let's time out real quick. Brock says, people say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing, and it's totally true. And the reason is because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. Brock follows up with, I say you need a vision big enough that nothing else can compete with it. And I would simply add to this, Brock, it also needs to be aligned with what organically comes out of you as a good life. I'm going to leave this up here for a second so people can read this. But Helen and Scott Nearing did the math, and they realized, in fact, if you read their writings, they foresaw the crash, the Black Friday crash that basically put us into the Great Depression. This was just a few years before. And they started to ask themselves a question about the good life. Now, quite often, I ask Marissa, I challenge Marissa quite often, are you trying to escape our life? Or are you trying to run to something? Are you running away from something or running to something? And Marissa would have a variant answer that follows this. And this is from the book. I'm just going to read it to you. We were not seeking to escape, as it were. Quite the contrary. We wanted to find a way in which we could put more into life and get more out of it. We were not shirking obligations, but looking for an opportunity to take on more worthwhile responsibilities, worthwhile to themselves. The chance to help, to improve and rebuild was more than an opportunity. As a citizen in this country and a citizen of the world, we regarded it as a calling and an assignment. Therefore, we decided not to migrate abroad, but to establish our life. And then they simply said this, we finally decided on our final alternative, and that was a self-sufficient household economy in the country and in the United States, which we would try to make solvent, efficient, and satisfying. Having made this decision, we then set to the task to define our purposes and adjust them to the possibilities of our situation. They first accepted realities and move from there. Brock says, he said, I say you need a vision big enough that nothing else can compete with it. Joe jumps in and says, the full good life, being know who you are, doing, live out of who you are so that you can have what you want to have. Joe, murdering it. That is a fantastic, fantastic quote. Carrie just echoes, go, Barack. And Joe says, yes. Run to the good life, and you will notice that you become free of the baggage of the rat race. Marissa says, peach. But I'm pretty sure she meant preach. And then Carrie just says, I need that book. And Carrie, just so you have it on the screen again, it is literally called The Good Life. Now, they then spend the rest of the book itemizing. Most of the rest of the book, though, it is seeded with a lot. Good morning, Laura. I hope you're doing fantastic this morning. Though this book has tons of their philosophy of shifting a life so radically and radically sustainable and radically sustainably happy. Though they paint that, much of the book, Carrie, is actually full of a lot of homesteading things, and it's our reference material that me and Marissa have as we continue to dream about a fully sustainable homesteading life. Laura jumps in and says, good morning. Good morning, Laura. And Brock jumps in and says 100% to Joe Childs. Absolutely, sir. Bam. So the good life is not necessarily running away from anything. The good life is not necessarily escaping obligations. You'll have to shift. You'll have to shift your obligations 100%. You'll have to close up responsibilities well to move to something new and fresh. But you have to first and foremost take the time before you jump into a mission. You have to take the time and establish what you think is your good life. First and foremost, they said they took a lot of time determining what a good life meant to them. They thought it meant sustainable living, taking care of oneself. They thought a good life is not working for fiat currency, to then take that fiat currency to buy food, to use that food to sustain, to wake up and what? Do it all again. They felt that the rat race was waking up, obtaining the food, eating it, and then having the rest of the day. In fact, one of their principles was they never worked past noon on feeding themselves. Think about that. What if you never worked past noon to feed yourself? What if you built your sustainability, your income, and really your consumption, your expenses? What if you built a life that your expenses only took up about 8 to noon every day? And then they said the rest of the day was giving to recreation. We call it recreation, but they call it recreation. If the farm needed an extra fence, they would do that. If they wanted to play the lute, they would do that. I really encourage you reading the book, because though you may or may not want to live on a farm, though me and Marissa still have a homesteading fantasy, you might have your own version of what a mission should be, or what a big enough dream should be, according to Brock, or what your good life is. It might be different. I know for a fact mine includes surfing, writing, and teaching. I want to be a teacher, not a school teacher, a teacher of the soul, a teacher of the heart. I want to be a teacher. And yes, a lot of it is small business training, because in order to be sustainable, we have to have value exchange of some kind. But for me, it's a means to an end to do small business teaching, and a means to an end is to be a teacher of the soul. And I want to surf because I love surfing. I want to be around the water because I love it. That's a good life to me. And I want to write because doing this show, talking to coaching clients is still not enough for the motor mouth of my heart. I still have stuff that I just want to talk about. I am a gushing fountain of thoughts and ideas and desires. So all of those things are just to facilitate that. And writing also facilitates that, to shape an idea and to hammer that idea so that people can understand it. That's a good life to me. Part of this also includes growing my own food. I just want to grow my own food. I want to always have a fruit tree. I want to always have a garden. What's your good life? You have no business shaping a mission if you haven't first dreamed of your good life. I recommend this book, and I cannot recommend it enough. A good life is not a life of escape. It's a life as you define it. And from that, very selfish. Free yourself to be selfish in that. And I mean Ayn Randian selfishness. I don't mean self-centeredness. I know that Joe Childs loves his kids and he loves his grandkids. And his selfish, very selfish good life would include more time in the North Carolina farm, more time with his grandkids, more time with his kids. That's a selfish thing. It's just not self-centered. There's a difference. He wants it to be about them. And then what does he do with the rest of his time? build a world and an empire and an income and values and the Joe Childs nation state. Carrie says, I want to garden again. Got to run to a meeting. Thank you, Grant and everyone. And I've got to run to coffee because my good life includes as much intimate time with my wife as possible. And that's just part of what I enjoy. So I'm going to go do that. Guys, go out there and make it a killer day. But remember, the mission is to ignite lives of explosive significance, but starting with your own. Have a fantastic